You're listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast about all things talent management for social impact organizations. This episode is part of a special series with Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR. This special series focuses on all things organizational culture. Never miss an episode of The Switch. Visit us online at nonprofithr.com/The Switch. In this episode, Lisa Brown Alexander will interview Martha Liggett, otherwise known as Marty, who is Executive Director of the American Society of Hematology, or ASH. And now for some information about our conversation host. Driven to serve the often overlooked people management needs for the social impact sector, Lisa Brown Alexander set out to build a market where one didn't exist. She founded Nonprofit HR in 2000, the leading talent management firm in the country that works exclusively with the nonprofit sector. A serial entrepreneur, Lisa is also co-founder of Wellspring Manor and Spa, located in Prince George's County, Maryland. Lisa's goal is to ensure that every nonprofit HR engagement inspires social sector leaders to strengthen their most important asset, their people. Over the course of her career, Lisa has presented to hundreds of organizations, staff, and leadership teams, covering all things talent management for the social sector. Nonprofit HR has also been listed by Inc. 5000 as one of the nation's fastest growing companies. ASH, which represents over 17,000 hematologists worldwide committed to preventing and curing blood diseases. Liggett was named Executive Director in 1996. During her tenure, ASH has transitioned to self-management, undertaken self-publication of its journals, brought management of the Society's annual meetings in-house, and renovated a headquarters building that is certified LEED Platinum. The ASH annual operating budget is $100 million and has 165 staff. Attendance for the ASH annual meeting is 30,000. Liggett has served on the board of directors of the Council of Medical Specialty Societies since 2019 and served as its president in 2021. Ms. Liggett served on the board of the American Society of Association Executives, ASAE, from 2013 to 2016, during which time she served on its awards leadership and audit committees. She continues as a member of the ASAE Key Professionals Association Committee, which she served as vice chair and chair from 2009 to 2010. She is also a member of the Global Key Associations Committee. Ms. Liggett was a member of the board of directors of the Association Mutual Health Insurance Company, AMHIC, from 2005 to 2010. Prior to joining ASH, Ms. Liggett was assistant professor at Boston University School of Dental Medicine, associate professor at Georgetown University School of Dentistry, and served as general counsel and assistant executive director at the American Association of Dental Schools. And now, here's Lisa and Marty.
Well, Marty Liggett, thank you so much for joining us. Delighted to have you. And I wondered, for the benefit of our audience, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the American Society for Hematology.
I'm happy to do that. So the American Society of Hematology represents about 18,000 physicians and researchers who study blood diseases. And our motto is that ASH helps hematologists conquer blood diseases worldwide. So that's what we're about. Breaking it down so that people understand exactly what that means, these physicians and researchers worry about sickle cell disease, anemia, leukemia, multiple myeloma, lots of very important diseases, also bleeding and blood clotting, which can be a really big problem for very many people too. So those are all in the domain of hematology. We are an international organization. About 20% of our members are from outside of North America. We have the premier hematology meeting in the world, and we're very proud of that. So every year, the cutting edge research that you really want to hear about is going to be presented at our annual meeting. And that's a big focus of what we do.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit and focus a little bit on the inside of ASH, as it's affectionately known, the American Society of Hematology. Tell us, if you would, a little bit about the culture and the organization that you've created as the CEO.
So our culture is above all else, collaborative. We like to collaborate with each other. That's the environment we want. That's the environment we want to create for ourselves. I often say that the environment you have at the office is the one that we all create together. It's not imposed on us from outside. So being collaborative is a choice, and it's very important to us. All of our staff is in the DC area. So we do have a hybrid environment where we're in the office Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Everybody is in the office the same days to facilitate the ability to schedule meetings and know that everybody's going to be able to be there. We do have telecommuting for most positions available on Mondays and Fridays. We've tried to kind of have the best of both worlds with this hybrid arrangement so that we are able to see each other, interact, collaborate, work in teams. But then there's also the Zoom meetings that take place, especially on the Mondays and Fridays. I think it's worked out well.
Let's talk about some of the other challenges that your organization has faced over the last 24 to 36 months. Would you mind sharing with our audience some of your talent management challenges and how you maybe overcome them?
One of our talent management challenges has been the need to have a thoughtful succession plan in place throughout the organization. I mean, often people think about succession for the executive director, the top person, but not carefully thinking about succession for all of the key positions, including some key administrative positions. So it's not just the senior staff. Making sure you've got some bench strength and that you're having mid-managers and those who are new to the organization being well-trained and having opportunities for professional development and thinking again through, could this person step up if necessary into a challenging situation? So it's been a slow and careful process to get there, but I think we have made good progress. The most recent one, our executive assistant and board liaison, and let me tell you, that's not an easy one to find. So hopefully we found the right person who's just starting.
Were there any additional complexities there when you factored in the hybrid work environment with doing the assessment about who might be ready for next roles and looking through and at succession planning? Did you have any unique challenges doing that in a remote environment or a hybrid environment?
I don't think we made as much progress when we were virtual on that one. When we were virtual, like everybody else, we were just trying to get everything done. And of course, with COVID, hematologists had a lot of pressure on them because they were involved in some of these bleeding and clotting issues that were associated with COVID. So that meant that our staff had to stand up a new webpage and quickly do clinical guidelines, and the amount of work was just huge.
Yeah.
So I would say we have made progress on the succession planning since we've been back in the hybrid environment and have been able to focus on that more. We had been doing some ahead of time. We have a business continuity plan in place to build on, and so succession planning is part of that. We really were just stretched very thin when we were virtual and focused so much on COVID.
Yeah, in crisis mode, right?
Yes.
As so many organizations were. Yeah.
Yes.
And the loftiest of talent management goals for many organizations got pushed to the wayside.
Yeah, and I would say the other challenge that we had, especially toward the end of the long period of virtual work, we started to see some of the relationships get a little sketchy. You know, we had some people by that time who had never met each other in person. They'd only met by Zoom. And I think it's hard to have a feeling for your colleagues that you're working with if you've never met them in person. And so that was a hurdle that was addressed when we got back into the hybrid environment. But it took a while to learn how to interact again. Yeah. Just like it took us a while to learn how to work virtually, it took us a while to learn how to interact with each other again and really appreciate the fact that it's okay to take a minute and huddle over here about an idea that's not in your daily Zoom chart of things to do. Right. You can be informal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as CEOs, we have a unique role in shaping the culture of our organizations pre-COVID, throughout COVID, post-COVID, whenever that really begins. Can you talk to us about maybe one thing that you've done as a CEO to enhance and sustain your organization's culture, particularly over the last 3 years, right? We have a unique role as CEOs, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about what you did to hold the culture together in that hybrid environment.
We had really good help from our HR staff, as you would imagine. We tried all kinds of different ways to keep people connected. And I have to give Dennis Sawyers, who's our Chief Human Relations Officer, credit for trying to think of ways to have a virtual experience together, to have a cooking class together, or to have, we had our staff meetings, of course, on a regular basis, and thinking about what's going to be on people's minds. What do they need to have answers to? I think it was important that Dennis was aware of what was on people's mind, and he would anticipate what they would have asked him if they ran into him in the hallway on a normal day. And they might not think about bringing it up, oh, I'm just one person, maybe what I'm worried about, other people aren't worried about, but to try to get people to say, what are you thinking about? Even if it's just one person, it's probably going to be very meaningful for other people to get that same kind of information. So what do you want to know about? We also had our chief medical quality officer head up an emergency team that was overseeing anything that had to do with COVID, both for the safety and health of our employees, but also advising. Again, we had FAQs that we developed and we put up on our website, and they were used around the world. We were holding our staff together, but also the staff was wanting to know information about COVID that everybody else wanted to know about. We have members in Hong Kong and in China. So we had information coming from hematologists that were based in those countries. And then when it hit Europe, and then when it hit the US, and keeping everybody up to date on what is the honest scientific information, what do we know, what don't we know? And again, what were people worrying about? Is it time to get another booster? Are 2 boosters too many? I mean, there were all kinds of questions out there that we tried.
Undoubtedly. And I would imagine the questions that were being asked by your staff and your stakeholders were different than the average individual, given the nature of your work and your mission focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So for instance, early on in COVID, there were a lot of problems with blood clotting. And this wasn't widely reported, but the folks on the front line knew about it. They would provide that information so people who hadn't yet experienced the blood clotting problems with their patients would be ready for it.
Looking to integrate talent into your mission strategic plan? During annual strategic planning, organizations often overlook what talent is needed to meet their goals. Partner with Nonprofit HR for your organization's talent management needs. We offer HR outsourcing and project-based consulting, including strategy and advisory, retained search, total rewards, and equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. We also offer customized trainings for your workforce. Join the many social impact organizations that have trusted Nonprofit HR to help them increase mission impact through their people. Visit nonprofithr.com.
As a health center organization, and I'll go on record to say this is not a question that you probably anticipated, but one I know you can answer. As a health-centered organization, how have you worked to ensure that the health advocacy that you have worked toward with the public is reflected internally? Tell us a little about the health benefits or how you center health and well-being among your staff.
We have set up a wellness initiative for the staff, and we try to be comprehensive. I was talking about COVID a minute ago, and we have FAQs that we developed and we update so people can know they can go to a reliable source that's been vetted, but that is understandable for average people, for non-hematologists who need to really understand it and maybe explain it to their parents or maybe explain it to their spouse. So we have that kind of information, but beyond that, as a health organization, first of all, we cover the health benefits for our staff. We have very robust health benefits and dental and vision and so on. But we also have counseling that's available for wellness. And if our employees choose to participate in that, then we reduce the small premium that we otherwise have them pay monthly toward their health insurance. So these are just quarterly, or some of them are 3 times a year, some are 2 times a year. You have your own personal confidential financial counselor and your own personal confidential wellness counselor. And whether you achieve the goals that you set is between you and the counselor. Ash doesn't want to know, but we want you to go have that benefit if you'd like to do it.
I love how aligned that is to what you advocate for in the public. Sometimes we have organizations that we're connected to through nonprofit HR that advocate for something publicly, but internally there's a little bit of a disconnect or some dissonance. So great to hear what Ash is doing, and I applaud you in that space.
Yeah, I would say, Lisa, that there's always something to learn too, so one of the things we've begun to advocate for and put more effort into recently is maternal health and reproductive rights.
Okay.
As we think about that, then we take a look at even though it's a very rich health benefit plan, there isn't as much there as I would have thought for fertility benefits.
Okay.
And so working on the issue sometimes feeds back into taking a look at what is being provided through your own plan and making sure that the cost of drugs, for instance, is really as good as the plan says it is. Okay, let's see, how does this really work for a patient who needs chemotherapy? So sometimes our issues do help us look very carefully at the benefits that we have for our staff.
I love that. I love that. Such alignment. As we think about well-being, let's talk a little bit about psychological safety that comes when you're with an organization or you work for an organization that is committed to equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. Can you tell us what your organization has done in this space as a starting point? And then I've got a follow-up question for you.
Well, we actually started thinking about underrepresented minorities in hematology 20 years ago. We started our minority recruitment initiative 20 years ago, and we have a continuum of support and awards that stretches from medical school through residency, through fellowship, and on to training to make someone be in a position to be a leader at an academic institution. We have people who have gone from medical school all the way through and sit now as assistant professor at Sloan Kettering, at WashU, and probably some others I'm not remembering.
Okay.
So we've had that commitment. What's happened then more recently is a creation of a DEI council is employee facing. So it's made up of our employees who volunteer, give advice, and figure out with our HR leadership and HR consultants, figure out what's going to make the most sense to improve DEI at ASH internally. And we also have a committee for the hematologists. One of our standing committees is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that committee has just finished a year-long effort interviewing every other committee in the organization and devising a plan for each committee within the organization related to DEI. And they're about to bring all of those things forward to a planning meeting coming up in May.
Wonderful progress in that space. So many organizations are struggling on their EDI journeys. And what we're hearing increasingly is that some leaders are facing some fatigue or experiencing fatigue. Do you have any advice for other nonprofit CEOs who may have started on this journey and may just not have the gas in the tank to keep going? Any thoughts, any advice for your peers?
That's a hard one. I think it's hard because I can't imagine not doing it. I can't, this is so central to what we do and who we are and what we aspire to for the profession and for our own employees. Maybe I would say it's important to take the long view. As I was just telling you, our minority recruitment initiative is 20 years old. When we started it, people said, well, if you put money into this, you're not going to get anything out of it. It's going to take years to get anything out of it. Well, they were right, but it took years and we're getting something out of it. So maybe just understanding that it's not going to change overnight. What you want, what you envision as a beautiful outcome is going to take work and going to take a long time, as anything difficult will. Having that approach to it is really helpful.
I think it is helpful. And as I often say to clients, you can't fix in 4 years what took 400 to occur, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, managing expectations, but remaining committed to the space and fostering not only a diverse environment, but an equitable one, and one that supports inclusion is just so important. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You know, the last few years have been particularly challenging for CEOs as they have kind of experienced, and I say we, because I'm a CEO too, have experienced kind of a collective stress related to talent management, keeping people, developing people, retaining people, attracting people. As a CEO of a large association, and ASH is a large organization with a large staff, tell us about what keeps you up at night and a little bit about the conversations you're having with CEOs in peer organizations. What's kind of that big talent management thing that maybe you're wrangling over?
I think there's been, this whole idea about going to fully virtual and then coming back to hybrid or not coming back. Some organizations are deciding to stay virtual. I think that's a lot of people are wrestling with that. I think it's really important to have the vision of what kind of environment you want to create, as I talked about earlier. So if collaboration is really important and that's a value you really are committed to, then you have to be prepared for the fact that not every employee will agree with that. You have to be honest about it. This is the vision we have. This is why we're going to have a hybrid environment. This is what we want. I understand if you've discovered during the time you worked 100% from home, that that's the most important thing for you in terms of your work. I get it. That could be a decision somebody made. And we did have a few people that made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have to be clear about where you're going in order to figure out how to lead the organization. If you determine where you're going by doing a survey every month of, well, what do most of the people on the staff want to do? You're never gonna get anywhere because you don't have a vision of what you want the environment to do. And then you have to take the leadership fallout, if you will, understanding that not everybody is going to want to go in that direction. What we found is that there are also people, and there are some new employees at ASH, who have discovered during the time that they worked from home exclusively that they need some interaction, and they really like the hybrid situation. It would be harder to say, let's only be in the office, but they really like the hybrids, which gives them some of both.
Yeah, it lends flexibility in a trust-based environment, really allows people to select what works for them in a way that works for them. So I definitely applaud you for that. You know, we're speaking to CEOs. They're listening in on our conversation and can probably relate to much of what you shared today. I wonder, how have you balanced the development of your technical leadership skills and the need to foster an environment of transparency and trust with filling your own cup as a leader? So many times CEOs in mission-driven organizations pour out so much of themselves and sometimes don't have a lot left in the can for their personal needs. And so what's been your experience and what advice might you give to a fellow CEO who is trying to balance what they give professionally with what they need personally?
Well, I think it's an awful lot like they say on the airplane, you have to put your own mask on first before you can help others. Nobody's 100% successful at wellness and space for your own care and feeding.
Yeah.
But it's important to try and recognize that running yourself into the ground by working, not having time with friends and family, not taking a time out for a vacation so that you can step away from everything. Even if it's a staycation, sometimes that's what you just need to do to get a reset. You have to be realistic also that, honestly, you can probably work 24/7 at this job and still never get it all done. So you have to set priorities and you have to take care of yourself. And I've been lucky to have a wonderful family and wonderful friends that make sure that I take time out too. They remind me that it's time to eat or it's time to party.
There you go. Well, you certainly can't pour from an empty cup. And so I applaud you for things that you've done personally to allow yourself to show up as an effective leader. Marty, thank you so much for your time today. We've enjoyed the conversation, and we certainly encourage others to take an example from you to invest meaningfully in not only the culture of your organization, but ensuring that there's alignment between what you advocate for publicly and what you practice internally. Marty, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you and all of the staff at the American Society of Hematology the very best.
Thanks, Lisa. It's been fun.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of The Switch. Thank you to Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR, and Marty Liggett, Executive Director for the American Society for Hematology. To learn more about ASH, visit them online at hematology.org. To learn more about Nonprofit HR, visit us online at nonprofithr.com.